Chapter 17, Parental Responsibility. God has permitted the light of health reform to shine upon us in these last days, that by walking in the light we may escape many of the dangers to which we shall be exposed. Satan is working with great power to lead men to indulge appetite, gratify inclination, and spend their days in heedless folly. He presents attractions in a life of selfish enjoyment and of sensual indulgence. Intemperance saps the energies of both mind and body. He who is thus overcome has placed himself on Satan's ground, where he will be tempted and annoyed and finally controlled at pleasure by the enemy of all righteousness. Parents need to be impressed with their obligation to give to the world children having well-developed characters, children who will have the moral power to resist temptation, and whose life will be an honor to God and a blessing to their fellow men. Those who enter upon active life with firm principles will be prepared to stand unsullied amid the moral pollutions of this corrupt age. Let mothers improve every opportunity to educate their children for usefulness. The work of the mother is sacred and important. She should teach her children from the cradle up habits of self-denial and self-control. Her time, in a special sense, belongs to her children. But if it is mostly occupied with the follies of this degenerate age, if society, dress, and amusements absorb her attention, her children will fail to be suitably educated. Many mothers who deplore the intemperance that exists everywhere do not look deep enough to see the cause. Too often it may be traced to the home table. Many a mother, even among those who profess to be Christians, is daily setting before her household rich and highly seasoned food, which tempts the appetite and encourages overeating. In some families, flesh meats constitute the principal article of diet, and in consequence, the blood is filled with cancerous and scrofulous humors. Then, when suffering and disease follow, Providence is charged with that which is the result of a wrong course. I repeat, intemperance begins at the table, and with the majority, appetite is indulged until indulgence becomes second nature. Whoever eats too much or a food which is not healthful is weakening his power to resist the clamors of other appetites and passions. Many parents, to avoid the task of patiently educating their children to habits of self-denial, indulge them in eating and drinking whenever they please. The desire to satisfy the taste and to gratify inclination does not lessen with the increase of years. And these indulged youth, as they grow up, are governed by impulse, slaves to appetite. When they take their places in society and begin life for themselves, they are powerless to resist temptation. In the glutton, the tobacco devotee, the wine bibber, and the inebriate, we see the evil results of erroneous education and of self-indulgence. When we hear the sad lamentation of Christian men and women over the terrible evils of intemperance, the questions at once arise: who have educated the youth? Who have fostered in them these unruly appetites? Who have neglected the solemn responsibility of forming their characters for usefulness in this life and for the society of heavenly angels in the next? When parents and children meet at the final reckoning, what a scene will be presented. Thousands of children who have been slaves to appetite and debasing vice, whose lives are moral wrecks, will stand face to face with the parents who made them what they are. Who but the parents must bear this fearful responsibility? Did the Lord make these youth corrupt? Oh, no. Who then has done this fearful work? Were not the sins of the parents transmitted to the children in perverted appetites and passions? And was not the work completed by those who neglected to train them according to the pattern which God has given? Just as surely as they exist, all these parents will pass in review before God. Satan is ready to do his work. He will not neglect to present allurements which the children will have no will or moral power to resist. I saw that through his temptations he is instituting ever-changing fashions and attractive parties and amusements, that mothers may be led to devote their time to frivolous matters instead of the education and training of their children. Our youth need mothers who will teach them from the cradle to control passion, to deny appetite, and to overcome selfishness. They need line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. The Hebrews were taught how to train their children so that they might avoid the idolatry and wickedness of the heathen nations. Therefore shall Ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. And ye shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Woman should fill the position which God originally designed for her as her husband's equal. The world needs mothers who are mothers not merely in name, but in every sense of the word. We may safely say that the distinctive duties of women are more sacred, more holy than those of man. Let woman realize the sacredness of her work, and in the strength and fear of God take up her life mission. Let her educate her children for usefulness in this world and for a home in the better world. The position of a woman in her family is more sacred than that of the king upon his throne. Her great work is to make her life an example such as she would wish her children to copy. And by precept as well as example, she is to store their minds with youthful knowledge and lead them to self-sacrificing labor for the good of others. The great stimulus to the toiling, burdened mother should be that every child who is trained aright and who has the inward adorning, the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, will shine in the courts of the Lord. I entreat Christian mothers to realize their responsibility and to live not to please themselves but to glorify God. Christ pleased not himself, but took upon him the form of a servant. He left the royal courts and clothed his divinity with humanity, that by his own example he might teach us how we may be exalted to the position of sons and daughters in the royal family, children of the heavenly King. But what are the conditions upon which we may obtain this great blessing? Come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. And I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters. Christ humbled himself from the position of one equal with God to that of a servant. His home was in Nazareth, a place proverbial for its wickedness. His parents were among the lowly poor. His trade was that of a carpenter, and he labored with his hands to do his part in sustaining the family. For 30 years he was subject to his parents. The life of Christ points out our duty to be diligent in labor and to provide for those entrusted to our care. In his lessons of instruction to his disciples, Jesus taught them that his kingdom is not a worldly kingdom where all are striving for the highest position, but he gave them lessons in humility and self-sacrifice for the good of others. His humility did not consist in a low estimate of his own character and qualifications, but in adapting himself to fallen humanity in order to raise them up with him to a higher life. Yet how few see anything attractive in the humility of Christ. Worldlings are constantly striving to exalt themselves one above another, but Jesus, the Son of God, humbled himself in order to uplift man. The true disciple of Christ will follow his example. Would that the mothers of this generation might feel the sacredness of their mission, not trying to vie with their wealthy neighbors in appearance, but seeking to honor God by the faithful performance of duty. If right principles in regard to temperance were implanted in the youth who are to form and mold society, there would be little necessity for temperance crusades. Firmness of character, moral control would prevail, and in the strength of Jesus, the temptations of these last days would be resisted. It is a most difficult matter to unlearn the habits which have been indulged through life. The demon of intemperance is of giant strength and is not easily conquered. But if parents begin the crusade against it at their own firesides, in their own families, in the principles they teach their children from their infancy, then they may hope for success. It will pay you, mothers, to use the precious hours which are given you by God in forming the characters of your children and in teaching them to adhere strictly to the principles of temperance in eating and drinking. A sacred trust is committed to parents to guard the physical and moral constitutions of their children so that the nervous system may be well balanced and the soul not endangered. Fathers and mothers should understand the laws of life, that they may not, through ignorance, allow wrong tendencies to develop in their children. The diet affects both physical and moral health. How carefully, then, should mothers study to supply the table with the most simple, healthful food, in order that the digestive organs may not be weakened, the nerves unbalanced, or the instruction which they give their children counteracted. Satan sees that he cannot have so great control over minds when the appetite is kept under control as when it is indulged, and he is constantly working to lead men to indulgence. Under the influence of unhealthful food, the conscience becomes stupefied, the mind is darkened, and its susceptibility to impressions is impaired. But the guilt of the transgressor is not lessened because the conscience has been violated until it has become insensible. Since a healthy state of mind depends upon the normal condition of the vital forces, what care should be exercised that neither stimulants nor narcotics be used. Yet we see that a large number of those who profess to be Christians are using tobacco. They deplore the evils of intemperance, yet while speaking against the use of liquors, these very men will eject the juice of tobacco. There must be a change of sentiment with reference to tobacco using before the root of the evil will be reached. We press the subject still closer. Tea and coffee are fostering the appetite for stronger stimulants. And then we come still closer to the preparation of food and ask, is temperance practiced in all things? Are the reforms which are essential to health and happiness carried out here? Every true Christian will have control of his appetites and passions. Unless he is free from the bondage of appetite, he cannot be a true obedient servant of Christ. The indulgence of appetite and passion blunts the effect of truth upon the heart. It is impossible for the Spirit and power of the truth to sanctify a man, soul, body, and spirit, when he is controlled by sensual desires. Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, pages 75 to 80.